On September 14, 1995, in the quiet suburban town of Parsippany, New Jersey, a 32-year-old woman named Jennifer Albrecht left for work at precisely 7:43 in the morning. Her husband, Michael, stood at the door of their split-level home on Maple Ridge Drive and waved goodbye. Their 2 children, still in pajamas, ate cereal at the kitchen table. By noon, Jennifer's silver Honda Accord was found idling in the parking lot of the Morris County Public Library, driver's side door open, her purse on the passenger seat, keys in the ignition. Jennifer Albrecht was gone. For 29 years, her family waited for answers. For 29 years, investigators returned again and again to the same inconsistencies, the same gnawing doubts, the same man who had waved goodbye that morning. And then, in March 2024, 2 arrests shocked a community that had long since stopped believing the truth would ever surface. This is the story of how a cold case finally broke open, and what those who loved Jennifer had suspected all along, but could never prove. Parsippany sits in the heart of Morris County, a sprawling township of tree-lined streets and commuter families, where office parks blend into residential neighborhoods, and strip malls give way to preserved wetlands. In 1995, it was the kind of place where people moved for good schools and safe streets, where neighbors knew each other's names, where children rode bicycles without supervision until the streetlights came on. The Albrecht family had lived there for 6 years, in a modest 3-bedroom house with a small backyard that backed onto a wooded conservation area. Michael worked as a regional sales manager for a pharmaceutical company. Jennifer was an administrative assistant at a law firm in nearby Morristown. Their daughter, Emma, was 7. Their son, Lucas, was 4. September 14, 1995, was a Thursday. The morning was cool and overcast, the kind of early autumn day when summer still clung to the edges but you could feel the shift coming. The leaves on the oak trees along Maple Ridge Drive had just begun to turn, small patches of yellow breaking through the green. Jennifer woke at 6:15, as she always did. She showered, dressed in a navy blazer and white blouse, made coffee in the kitchen while Michael got the children ready for school. Emma's backpack sat by the front door, already packed. Lucas would go to daycare after Jennifer dropped Emma at Knollwood Elementary. Those who knew Jennifer described her as methodical, organized, the kind of person who wrote lists and kept a calendar on the refrigerator with everyone's schedules color-coded. She was quiet, friends said, not prone to drama or impulsive decisions. She drove the same route to work every day. She called her mother every Sunday evening. She picked Emma up from gymnastics on Tuesdays and Thursdays at exactly 4:30. That morning, Michael later told police they ate breakfast together, toast and scrambled eggs. Emma complained about a math test. Lucas spilled orange juice on his shirt and had to change. Jennifer cleaned it up without comment, wiped the table, rinsed the glass. At 7:40, she gathered her purse and briefcase, kissed the children, told Michael she would be home by 6. He walked her to the door. He said he watched her back out of the driveway, watched her turn left onto Parsippany Road, watched until the silver Honda disappeared behind the neighbor's hedges. She never made it to work. At 8:45, Jennifer's supervisor at the law firm called the house. Michael answered. He said Jennifer had left on time, should have been there by 8:15 at the latest. Traffic maybe, the supervisor suggested. Michael agreed. But when Jennifer still hadn't arrived by 10:00, the supervisor called again. This time, Michael said he would drive the route himself, check for an accident. At 11:52, a librarian at the Morris County Public Library noticed a silver Honda idling in the parking lot, driver's door ajar. The engine was running. The radio was on, tuned to an AM news station. The librarian approached, looked inside. A black leather purse sat on the passenger seat, unzipped. A silver briefcase lay on the floor of the backseat. Keys dangled from the ignition. The librarian called the police. By 12:30, Parsippany police had cordoned off the parking lot. Michael Albrecht arrived at 12:47, his face pale, his hands shaking. He identified the car immediately. He looked inside, saw the purse, saw Jennifer's planner open to that day's date. Officers asked him questions. When had she left? What was she wearing? Had they argued? Was anything wrong? Michael said no, nothing was wrong. Everything was normal. She had just left for work like she always did. Clears throat. The library sat on Route 46, a major commercial thoroughfare that ran east-west through Parsippany. Jennifer's route to work should have taken her south on Parsippany Road, then east on Route 10 toward Morristown. The library was northwest of their home, in the opposite direction. There was no reason for Jennifer to be there. No reason for her car to be idling in that parking lot with the door open and her belongings inside. The investigation. Within 2 hours, the Parsippany Police Department had mobilized a full search operation. Officers fanned out across the surrounding area, the parking lot, the library building, the wooded areas behind the shopping center, the drainage culverts that ran beneath Route 46. K9 units were brought in. The dogs tracked a scent from the driver's seat of Jennifer's car across the parking lot to the edge of the woods, then lost it near a small service road that connected to a residential neighborhood. By evening, volunteers had organized. Friends, neighbors, coworkers, people who had never met Jennifer but had seen her face on the news. They came with flashlights and thermoses of coffee, dividing into teams, walking grid patterns through the conservation area behind the Albrecht home, along the banks of Troy Brook, through the overgrown lots near the abandoned textile mill on Smith Road. Someone made flyers. Jennifer's face, smiling in a photograph from the previous Christmas, appeared on telephone poles and store windows throughout Morris County. Michael Albrecht spoke to reporters on the front lawn of his home. He wore a wrinkled Oxford shirt, his hair uncombed, his voice breaking. "If anyone has seen my wife," he said, please call the police. We just want her home. The kids need her home." Behind him, through the living room window, Emma could be seen sitting on the couch, her face turned toward the television. Detectives interviewed Michael extensively. They sat in the kitchen of the Albrecht home, notebooks open, asking him to walk through the morning again and again. What time did Jennifer wake up? What did she wear? What did they talk about? Did she seem upset, distracted? Had there been any strange phone calls, any unusual visitors? Michael answered patiently. He said Jennifer seemed normal. She wasn't upset. They hadn't argued. She had plans to meet her sister for lunch on Saturday. She had mentioned needing to buy new shoes for Lucas. Everything was ordinary. But the timeline didn't fit. The drive from the Albrecht home to Jennifer's office in Morristown took, on average, 18 minutes. Jennifer left at 7:43. Her car was found at the library at 11:52, still running. Investigators estimated the car had been idling for at least 2 hours, based on the fuel gauge and engine temperature. That meant the car had been left there sometime around 10:00 a.m. or earlier. But where had Jennifer been for the 2 hours between leaving home and the car appearing at the library? Deputies measured distances. They drove routes. They timed everything. From the Albrecht home to the library, 11 minutes. From the Albrecht home to Jennifer's office, 18 minutes. There was no scenario in which Jennifer's morning commute placed her at that library parking lot unless she had intentionally driven there. Clears throat. On September 16, 2 days after Jennifer vanished, detectives executed a search warrant on the Albrecht home. They looked through closets, drawers, Jennifer's desk. They examined the children's rooms. They searched the garage, the basement, the attic. They photographed everything. In the master bedroom, investigators found Jennifer's wedding ring on the nightstand. Michael said she never wore it to work anymore, that it had become loose and she was afraid of losing it. In the kitchen, they found a notepad with a grocery list in Jennifer's handwriting: milk, bread, apples, chicken. In the garage, they found Michael's car, a dark green Chevrolet Blazer. The odometer read 47,291 miles. Officers documented the mileage, photographed the interior. The vehicle was clean. Too clean, one detective noted in his report. Vacuumed recently. No trash, no dirt, smells of cleaning solution. Neighbors were interviewed. The woman across the street said she had seen Michael leaving the house around 8:00 that morning, maybe 8:15, driving the Blazer. Another neighbor, an elderly man who walked his dog every morning, said he had seen Michael return home around 9:30. Michael had told police he was home all morning, that he hadn't left until he went to check Jennifer's route at 10:30. On September 18, Michael agreed to take a polygraph examination. The results were inconclusive. When asked directly, "Did you harm your wife?" the examiner noted physiological responses indicative of deception, but the test could not be considered definitive. Michael maintained his innocence. He said he loved Jennifer. He said he had no idea where she was. He said he wanted her found as desperately as anyone. Those who knew Michael described him as charming, outgoing, the kind of man who made friends easily. He played softball in a local league. He coached Lucas's t-ball team. He was active in the PTA. But there were others who said something else. A coworker from the pharmaceutical company mentioned that Michael had been having an affair, that he had been seen with another woman at a hotel in Parsippany in July. Jennifer's sister, Rachel, told detectives that Jennifer had confided in her 2 weeks before she disappeared, said that Michael had become distant, that he stayed out late, that she had found hotel receipts in his jacket pocket. The affair was confirmed. The other woman, a sales representative named Denise Callahan, admitted to the relationship. She said it had been going on for 4 months. She said Michael had told her he was planning to leave Jennifer, that the marriage was over, that he just needed time to figure out how to tell her. On September 22, divers searched Troy Brook and the nearby reservoirs. They found nothing. On September 29, cadaver dogs were brought to the conservation area behind the Albrecht home. The dogs indicated on a spot near the edge of the woods, but when investigators dug, they found only animal remains, a deer carcass, partially decomposed. By October, the investigation had stalled. There were no witnesses, no body, no physical evidence connecting Michael to Jennifer's disappearance, despite the inconsistencies, despite the affair, despite the cleaned car and the conflicting statements. Deputies whispered quietly among themselves. They believed Michael had done something to his wife. They believed he had driven her somewhere that morning, driven her car back to the library, left it there to stage an abduction. But they couldn't prove it. Not without Jennifer. The case went cold. The silence. In February 1996, 5 months after Jennifer vanished, Michael moved with Emma and Lucas to Pennsylvania, to a small town near Scranton where his parents lived. He told the few people who asked that he couldn't stay in the house anymore, couldn't drive past the library, couldn't live with the questions. He got a new job. He enrolled the children in new schools. He stopped returning calls from detectives. For Emma, who was 8 by then, the move felt like erasure. She didn't understand why they couldn't stay in the house where her mother's clothes still hung in the closet, where her mother's coffee mug sat in the cabinet, where her mother might come back and find them. She asked her father questions he wouldn't answer. Where is Mom? Why did we leave? When is she coming home? Michael said the police were still looking. He said they needed a fresh start. He said Emma needed to be strong for Lucas. Lucas, who was 5, stopped talking about his mother by the time he turned 6. He didn't remember her face clearly anymore, only fragments, the sound of her voice, the smell of her perfume, the way she hummed while she cooked dinner. He had nightmares. He woke up screaming, unable to articulate what he had seen, only that something bad had happened, something he couldn't name. Michael remarried in 1998. His new wife, a woman named Carla, was kind to the children patient, but there was an unspoken rule in the house. They didn't talk about Jennifer. Her name became a ghost, a presence felt but never acknowledged. Emma kept a photograph of her mother hidden in her dresser drawer under her socks. She looked at it sometimes when she couldn't sleep. For those who have ever doubted someone you love, who have felt the weight of a suspicion you can't voice, who have watched someone you're supposed to trust and wondered what they're hiding, this is what Emma lived with. She remembered the morning her mother disappeared. She remembered her father's reaction when the police came. She remembered how quickly he had cleaned out her mother's things, how he had boxed up her clothes and donated them within weeks, how he never cried, never seemed surprised when Jennifer didn't come home. By the time Emma was 16 in 2004, she rarely spoke to her father. She spent as much time as possible at friends' houses, working part-time jobs, planning her escape to college. Lucas, who was 13, had grown sullen, withdrawn. He fought with Michael constantly. He got in trouble at school. He drew violent, chaotic images in his notebooks, figures falling, dark shapes, fire. In 2006, Michael and Carla divorced. The marriage had deteriorated slowly, Carla later said, not because of infidelity or abuse, but because of the silence, the weight of the unspoken past. She said she had asked Michael once, directly, what had happened to Jennifer. He had looked at her, his face blank, and said, "I don't know." But Carla didn't believe him. No one who knew the story really believed him. Emma went to college in Vermont. She studied psychology. She didn't come home for holidays. She changed her last name when she turned 21 from Albrecht to her mother's maiden name, Sullivan. Lucas joined the military at 18, served 2 tours overseas, came back different, quieter, harder. Neither of them spoke to Michael anymore. The years passed. The case remained cold. Jennifer Albrecht was classified as a missing person, presumed dead, but without a body, without evidence, there could be no charges, no arrest, no resolution. Detectives who had worked the case retired. Files were archived. The public moved on. But Emma didn't. The revelation. In November 2023, Emma Sullivan, now 35 and living in Burlington, Vermont, received a phone call from the Morris County Prosecutor's Office. A cold case detective named Sergeant Anthony Morales introduced himself. He said the Jennifer Albrecht case was being reviewed as part of a new initiative using updated forensic technology. He asked if Emma would be willing to speak with him. She said yes. They met in a small conference room at the prosecutor's office in Morristown. Emma brought a box of documents, police reports she had requested over the years, newspaper clippings, her mother's old calendar that she had kept. Sergeant Morales listened as Emma walked him through her memories of that morning in September 1995. She told him about the timeline inconsistencies. She told him about the affair. She told him about her father cleaning the car, about the neighbors seeing him leave the house when he said he was home, about the hotel receipts her mother had found. "I was 7, Emma said, her voice steady, "but I remember. I remember him telling the police he was home all morning. I remember him telling me that Mom just left for work. But I also remember hearing the garage door open twice that morning, once when Mom left, and once about half an hour later. I didn't think about it at the time, but I've thought about it every day since." Sergeant Morales took notes. He asked Emma if she would be willing to provide a formal statement. She agreed. In January 2024, investigators re-interviewed witnesses from the original case. They tracked down Denise Callahan, Michael's former girlfriend, now living in Florida. She had remarried, had children, had tried to move past the shadow of 1995. She told detectives that Michael had called her the morning Jennifer disappeared. She said he had sounded panicked, frantic. He told her, "Something happened. I can't talk now. I'll call you later." He never called back. She said she had told investigators this in 1995, but it had been dismissed as hearsay. They re-interviewed the neighbors. The woman across the street, now in her 70s, still remembered seeing Michael leave that morning. She said she had told police at the time, but her statement seemed to have been overlooked in the initial reports. The elderly man who walked his dog confirmed the same. Michael left around 8:15, returned around 9:30. In February 2024, investigators obtained a warrant to search a storage unit in Scranton, Pennsylvania, rented under Michael Albrecht's name since 1997. Inside, they found boxes of old financial records, tax documents, photographs. They also found a black leather briefcase, identical to the one described in the original police report as belonging to Jennifer. Inside the briefcase were documents dated September 1995, including a draft of divorce papers that Jennifer had apparently been preparing, outlining custody arrangements for Emma and Lucas. On March 8, 2024, Michael Albrecht, now 61 years old and living in Scranton, was arrested and charged with murder in the death of Jennifer Albrecht. He was taken into custody at his home without incident. Officers noted that he showed no visible emotion, no surprise. Simultaneously, Denise Callahan was arrested in Tampa, Florida, and charged as an accessory after the fact. Investigators alleged that she had helped Michael dispose of evidence in the days following Jennifer's disappearance, specifically helping him clean his vehicle and providing a false alibi. The arrests made national news. Headlines read, "Cold case broken after 29 years, NJ woman's husband charged with murder." The community of Parsippany, many of whom had followed the case since 1995, reacted with a mixture of vindication and sorrow. Those who had always suspected Michael felt a grim satisfaction. Those who had defended him expressed shock, disbelief. Lucas Albrecht, now 33, released a statement through his attorney. "I have spent my entire life wondering what happened to my mother. I am grateful that someone finally listened. I am grateful that there will be answers." Emma Sullivan said simply, "I knew." The prosecution's case, outlined in court filings, alleged the following. Michael Albrecht, facing the end of his marriage and the financial consequences of divorce, murdered his wife on the morning of September 14, 1995. He struck her in the garage of their home, placed her body in his Chevrolet Blazer, and drove to a remote location, likely in the forested areas of northwestern New Jersey, where he disposed of her remains. He then returned home, took Jennifer's car, drove it to the library parking lot, and staged it to appear as though she had been abducted. He called Denise Callahan for help. Together, they cleaned his vehicle and coordinated alibis. Jennifer's body has never been found. Michael Albrecht pleaded not guilty. His attorney argued that the case was circumstantial, that no physical evidence directly linked Michael to his wife's death, that the prosecution was relying on decades-old inconsistencies, and the testimony of a daughter traumatized by her mother's disappearance. But the evidence was overwhelming. The timeline, the affair, the divorce papers, the witnesses, the phone call to Denise, the briefcase hidden for 29 years. In October 2024, facing the weight of the prosecution's case, Michael Albrecht accepted a plea agreement. He pleaded guilty to manslaughter and agreed to provide information about the location of Jennifer's remains in exchange for a reduced sentence. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison. On November 12, 2024, Michael led investigators to a forested area near the Delaware Water Gap, approximately 45 miles northwest of Parsippany. He pointed to a location near an abandoned logging road. Cadaver dogs indicated on the spot. Investigators began excavation. On November 15, they recovered skeletal remains later identified through dental records as Jennifer Albrecht. Denise Callahan pleaded guilty to hindering prosecution and was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Emma and Lucas were present when their mother's remains were returned to them. They held a private funeral service in December 2024. Jennifer was buried in a cemetery in Parsippany, not far from the house on Maple Ridge Drive where she had lived, where she had been a mother, where she had made breakfast on an ordinary Thursday morning and never came home. Closing. The case of Jennifer Albrecht is a story of patience, the slow accumulation of truth, the quiet persistence of those who refuse to forget, the decades-long wait for justice that seems impossible until suddenly it isn't. It is a story about the questions children carry, about the weight of suspicion that becomes certainty, about the man who waved goodbye and the woman who never arrived. Jennifer Albrecht was 32 years old when she died. She was a daughter, a sister, a mother. She kept a color-coded calendar. She called her mother every Sunday. She was planning to leave a marriage that had become unbearable to start over, to build a life where she and her children could be safe. She didn't get that chance. If this story mattered to you, subscribe and hit the bell. Share the episode. Someone somewhere may still be waiting to be heard.